Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Entrepreneurship Lab. This is new episode, and this is Nevena, your host, where we welcome you to the show and is always bringing you amazing information, amazing guests to help you grow and scale your business. And today we're going to talk about a couple of things. So we're going to talk definitely about marketing. We're going to talk about building a long-term game because my guest today is Erik Dodier, and Erik is EOS Implementer. He's a former CEO and definitely someone who cares about long-term gaming entrepreneurship, avoiding burnout, and short-term thinking when it comes to building his business. So, Erik, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you, Navina. Nice to be here. Thank you for having me on.
So we like to start, I like to start usually the show by asking you a little bit about how did you become entrepreneur? You were CEO, obviously. You can give us a little bit of background about you and your story. So what led you to start your first business? What was the business about? And then that story will lead us into your journey and what you learned from it as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Well, I don't just think about long term. My entrepreneurial career was very long term. I started my first business, and the business that I had most of my career was a company called PixelMEDIA in 1994. Some odd 30 plus years ago, and built that business from just two people, building websites. This was the mid 90s, so this was the early internet days, and eventually migrated into a very large Salesforce implementation partner, as we had pivoted many times through that 30-year journey, and ultimately sold that business in 2022. And I finally stepped away in 2024, and that's actually when I became an EOS implementer, because EOS was a tool that we had used in the later stages of our business to grow, and I just found it so helpful in helping us, and that I thought, geez, this would be a great sort of next phase for me to give back to other entrepreneurs and help them build their businesses. So very long term sort of
Yeah.
overnight success, I like to say, and very happy to be in the position I'm in now to help other businesses in the EOS world.
So for those who don't know, can you explain what is EOS? How does it work? How did you started using it and how it can help other entrepreneurs as well?
Yeah. So EOS stands for the Entrepreneurial Operating System. And, taking you back on my story, I mean, when we started in 1994, I'd only had one other job after I went to college at the University of New Hampshire. And, I always had entrepreneurial instincts. My father was an entrepreneur. I liked to read Inc. magazine at a young age. I just felt like I wanted to start something on my own. So at my very first job, I bumped into somebody who I had known. Um, and even had grown up with a bit. And him and I began PixelMEDIA, which is basically a multimedia company, web design development company. And we just kept pivoting through the years, and somehow kind of scratched our way to become about a $15 million company with about 75 people. But it took us literally 20 years, to get to that. And we started adopting EOS because a friend of mine who I had known had posted on his LinkedIn that he was helping companies implement EOS, and so I gave him a call to ask him what it was all about. We had tried everything, in the business and getting our core values right and everything, and it just never all clicked. And when we started using this EOS operating system, it all came together. So fundamentally, what EOS allows you to do is sort of create this vision we call vision, traction, and healthy. So you create a really clear vision of where you want the business to go, and you get everybody on board with going in that direction. You create traction, so you get everybody on board with working towards that vision, and then you really create a healthy leadership team. And what I do is I work with the leadership team so that they're just operating in a more healthy way. And we like to say, as goes the leadership team, so goes the business. And it was absolutely transformational for my business, PixelMEDIA. We grew 5 times bigger in the 5 years using EOS than we did in the previous 25 years. So I can speak from experience. It really did work for us.
Yeah, that's amazing. And thank you for sharing that tool with us and all the listeners because it's always valuable to find out about something that's working, right, from your experience. So I'm curious to know, like, very long time from the 90s to 2022, right? Very long time. And at that 90s, right, there was no websites, everything was just starting, boom of .com. So how did you grow the business? You had to, of course, follow all the changes, how the market was changing, and so on. So, how are you guys staying relevant all of these years? Changing? Did you like had a plan every year? Did you had a team that was looking into what's happening in the market? Because many companies get out of the business because they're not upgrading, they're not following the market trends. So, what are some stories that you
Yeah.
guys had? I mean, it's a huge difference, like 20 something years
Right.
from just starting the digital world to now having AI. It's insane. So, what were some stories that you guys had, and how did you stay relevant?
Well, so many stories because we had to pivot so many times. But it's funny, even in the first 6 months of our business, we had began to be a multimedia company delivering content on CD-ROM, which you don't even hear that term anymore. But this is 1994. And I remember in the first 6 months of our business, people started talking about the web. So this is 1995. So anybody that was around then, like you said, the web was just starting to become more usable and people were hearing more about the web. So I was the salesperson in the business. My business partner was more of the technology and delivery side. And I remember coming back one day to the office and saying, "Hey, nobody wants to talk about CD-ROMs anymore. They want to talk about the web." And interestingly, he was a very bright guy, and he said, "Well, I've heard a lot about HTML. Let me take a book home and I'll read up on it." And it was funny because over the weekend he read up on HTML 1.0, which was like the early days of the web, and came back on Monday and said, "Hey, we're all set. We'll just instead of delivering on CD-ROM, we'll deliver on the web." So that was sort of our very first pivot in the very first 6 months. And then we just kind of adopted that mentality that whatever comes our way, we'll start to adopt to. Um, the pros and cons of that is you become a lot of things to a lot of people, but you don't really have much focus. So later in our journey, we had to become much more narrow and focused, which became around e-commerce and some different technologies, and that's what really helped us kind of springboard to where we could position the business for sale, much later. So it starts out as
Yeah.
a general business, say yes to a lot of things, and then start to narrow down with the things that you're really good at.
Yeah. And did you ever thought that you guys gonna stay in business for so long and then have an exit sale? Did you plan to exit from the beginning, or it was just something to, build with your business partner?
Yeah, I don't think we formally thought about it. I probably always had in the back of my mind, this dream of this complete entrepreneurial journey of building and selling a business. But service businesses are not easy to sell. Service businesses, especially building websites, there's hundreds, thousands of companies that build websites. So what I think I kind of always kept in the back of my mind, like, how could we pivot our way into something where we could create real enterprise value in the business? And that ultimately became doing e-commerce and ultimately becoming part of the Salesforce partner network. So we were a partner of Salesforce. We would help companies implement the Salesforce platform. And that's such a big industry with big players and partners that at that point, our business, PixelMEDIA, became valuable to larger entities that wanted to kind of incorporate us into their strategy. So um,
Yeah.
yeah, you don't always have it all completely mapped out, but you just keep taking small steps, I think, and the things that are right in front of you, and it kind of leads you on a direction.
Yeah. So, how was it for the beginning of you guys, if you remember, or even later on, because you pivoted so much? Maybe a lot of startups, when they have to grow, they have to acquire customers, and so on. So, can you share some things that were the best for you, that worked best for your type of business to acquire new customers or retain the customers, create some kind of retainer, bringing them back, have a new offer that they can again purchase from you? So, what were some things that worked the best for you?
Yeah, well, we in the mid '90s, it was kind of a new technology, and we were pretty young, so I think we had a lot of credibility, almost because we were younger and building out this new technology. Sometimes it's actually an advantage. And then we would launch clients' websites, and we built a whole support team so that we could continue to support the clients, so we would have that constant relationship. Um, and relationships became critical to us. How do you get to know the customers? How do you let them get to know us? And I'd say that was in the services business, that's really all you have is your relationship with your client because there was no specific technology that we had that others couldn't do. So I'd say those strong relationship with client is the best
Yeah.
defense to holding on to those customers. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, One thing that I really loved about Jeff Bezos and Amazon is really his obsession about customer, and that was my number one lesson.
Yeah.
Looking into some big businesses out there, and we can like some, not like, but we can take and learn the lessons. And it was always that customer obsession and delivering the best service, and being focused just on that. Because if we create that, the customers will stay and use our services over and over
Yeah.
again. So I
Yeah.
definitely agree that's so important.
I think he always had the empty chair in the conference room, right? That was represented the customer. So that was a good reminder for everybody in the room to think about the customer first.
I love that. So that's something that we can all implement. So thank you for sharing. And what are some mistakes that you guys did? Because for sure you did a lot of mistakes that you had no idea. Sometimes you jump in and we don't know how we're gonna get the next steps and grow. And are there any mistakes that you lost money, that you lost customers? I mean, in 20 something years, you pivoted so much
Yeah.
in tech. So what were some mistakes that were really like a loss, but a big lesson for you?
Yeah. Wow. Well, it's so funny you're asking these questions. A lot of these mistakes happen very early on, which I guess is a good thing because you learn them quickly. Um, in fact, our very first contract that we won to help a technology company, they were called Banyan Vines. This is going back way in the 90s. Um, our offering was still evolving. So the very first client said, yes, we'll work with you guys. I remember going back and telling my business partner, his name was Tom, hey, we got a new client. This is what we can do for him. And he said, Eric, I don't know if we can do that. It was a very complicated, sophisticated presentation for a large trade show. And I remember thinking, is there any way we can figure it out? We've got our first client. They actually had given us a little bit of a deposit. And at the end of the day, we decided, and this is a very hard thing to do, that we weren't going to be able to do right by this client. And so we ended up giving them their, calling them up and saying, look, here's the situation. We don't think what you're asking for is really the best fit for us. That was probably my mistake because I was the sales guy that wanted to sell something. And we said, look, we're going to give you your money back. We think you'd be better served. We referred them to somebody, and they were happy. So I think, we both made the mistake of trying to take it on, but quickly pivoted and say, look, this isn't going to be the best fit for us. And I think a lot of companies do make that mistake early on, trying to say yes to too many things and too much variety of things. And we probably continued to do that, but we learned early on that, if you just kind of be honest with the client, there's a good lesson there, and you kind of, can pick up where you left off from there.
Yeah, and this is a huge mistake because the point is it's not about the sale, it's about getting the service or getting the product, the promise, right? And actually, sale is just a promise that something is going to happen or you're going to deliver something. And if we cannot deliver, I think that was a very good step that you step out and said, this is our specialty, this is the things we can do, and these we cannot. And I think that was a great move, but yeah, sometimes we
Yeah.
rush and we
Yeah.
we rush and we just want to sail, and then we realize, okay, I don't think I can deliver here.
Yeah, yeah, right. Yeah, and then that helped us later on too because as we grew the business, we did have a lot of different services because we said yes to a lot of things. Now, luckily, we could deliver on all of them, but later in the years, a lot of companies started to specialize in certain parts of where it was only one part of our business, but it was 100% of their business. And it also taught us the lesson that we had to start to get our business much more narrowed down. And it's kind of
Yeah.
like the idea, be good at really, one thing. Maybe we can't satisfy all these customers, but let's satisfy this set of customers really well. And that's
Yeah.
something we teach in EOS as well, actually, all about target market, know your customer, stay to your core focus. And I think those lessons, again, I think that's what ultimately allowed us to scale our business. We were spread too thin and we were just kind of treading our wheels and, spinning our wheels. And eventually when we got really narrow, that's when the business really took off.
Okay, I love that. And a lot of entrepreneurs I spoke with in interviews really saw the difference in their business when they really specified a niche. I do think sometimes at the beginning we're confused. And also, the tricky thing with niche is that it kind of looks like it narrows down your the number of the quantity of your customers. But it's very important, of course, that we choose a niche where we have the customers who want to buy, but also the niche gives us that kind of urgency because we know exactly this is my perfect customer. They want this now, they need this service. So you know exactly who to target because we lose so much energy and time trying to sell to so many people. And they maybe will use our product or service in the future, but they're not now. And I think this is where a lot of entrepreneurs are actually struggling in their sales.
Yeah, it's a great point. In fact, I think the more you can narrow your niche, it makes every part of your business so much easier because you know just the right employees to hire that can satisfy that. You know right where your customers are. You know how to find them. And as you get really good at it, the customers start to find you because
Yes.
they live in that niche market and they start to hear of this company that's doing really great work in their niche and they want to go work with them. So that's really the magic is when the customers start reaching out to you because you're so well known in that small world. But yeah,
Mhm.
I think sometimes we think, oh, we can't say no to anything, and this niche is too small. It's a pretty big world out there, and you know most niches are pretty big that you can still have a pretty good sized business with.
Exactly. And if we learn how to repackage and offer something, you know, to add a zero on our service or product, you can,
Sure.
just have that 10x your business very easily with just changing a little bit your offer, your packages, and so on. But I want to ask you, I love to ask this question to all my guests. In your journey of so many years, was there maybe one thing that you wish you knew earlier in building a business? That now when you look back, you're like, it's so basic sometimes and so simple, but at the moment we're just hustling, working, we don't realize. And then we're like, hey, this is my aha moment. Or if I just did this, more of this thing that worked for us, what was it for you? Was there any like aha moment that if you can go back in time, you wish you knew a little bit earlier because you guys would get results maybe faster?
Yeah, I think it comes down to you know, when you're the founder, you sort of do everything and then you eventually figure out, okay, I'm gonna delegate this part of the business to this person, I'm gonna hire this person. But you don't probably delegate fast enough and you don't always know how to delegate certain things. And so what I think I've learned, and it helped us a lot with EOS, is getting all those right people around you. And sometimes the right people are the right people for a certain period of growth in the business, and then you can outgrow their abilities and their skills, and you need to kind of level up and get the next level of right people. And some people grow right through that. Some people are the right people all the way through the journey because they can continue to grow. And I think your job, especially as CEO, is ultimately just getting all those right people in the right seats and building that top leadership team because I noticed when we did that, it's funny. I always used to say, I think it was easier running a bigger business than it was running a smaller business. Because when you're running a bigger business, you can afford to have all the right leaders in all the right places who know their job way better than I knew their job. When you're a small business, you sort of have, you promote from within. Maybe they don't want to be a manager, maybe they do, but you end up with a leadership team that maybe isn't perfect, but you just sort of push through. And so I always joke that it was much easier running a 500 person business than it was running a 50 person business. So if you can get through that, it can get easier as CEO, I think.
Yes, and you know, when we're starting, we see as outsourcing or giving, it's like you're struggling with your budget. And then at the beginning, most of us see it, it was also me at the beginning, you see it as paying someone else. You're stressed because now it's not just you making money, you have to provide salaries, you have to pay things for these people, insurance, and so on. So it's like a big responsibility in the growth of the company. And then a lot of startups really struggle, and we take so many roles that take our time because we're not good at all of the things. Like we need to focus on if we are amazing on delivering the service, we should deliver the service, or if we're good on getting customers for the business and clients, do that. And start outsourcing. And I think in today's world with virtual assistants, with so much of AI, this can become easier. But it's also very interesting that you said that because so many entrepreneurs told me that the biggest challenge they had was building the team
Yeah.
and getting the right people on the right seats. And once you achieve that, yes, and you build those systems, everything runs so much easier.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And it's funny, as I started to implement EOS and now that I've become an EOS implementer, a lot of these concepts are now much more tuned that we were doing it kind of shooting from the hip. We didn't really know what was working. So sometimes things work, sometimes they didn't. What I've learned now with EOS, and I think why it was so helpful to us, it kind of packages up a lot of these concepts and just sort of gives you the tools to do all these things right, kind of from the start. And so it's funny, when I go have coffee with people and I'm sitting, we're talking, and they're telling me about their business, I can see so clearly now where the challenges are. Oh, that's a right person challenge, or they don't have the right process challenge, or they're not getting all their issues out. There's issues kind of beneath the surface, and these are kind of the key pillars of the key components of EOS, and I can see it so clearly now. Now that I'm on the other side of the table, I couldn't when I was in the business, right? I was in the business and I was struggling, but now that I'm looking in on other entrepreneurs' businesses and they're sharing what their challenges are, I love bringing the EOS to them because they're like, oh my God, Eric, this is amazing. Like, where was this, 20 years ago? So it's kind of fun to be on this side of the table now.
I think that's the power of really bringing someone on the side to coach you and consult you because they see your problems from different perspective, and especially when someone had so much experience in business, and been through what you've been, they know that, and this can save you literally years of your life. And I think that investment into bringing someone into your business to look from the side, to know and identify this is your actual problem, this is what you have to do, is so helpful and so important. So, as we are wrapping the episode, I would love, Eric, to ask you maybe some final advice. Or maybe you can invite people to start using EOS, whichever you want to share with listeners that we didn't share, but you think it can really help them.
Yeah. Well, kind of where we started, I think people have to think much more longer term. We live in a world where it's just everything's fast, everything is trending towards, try to start a business up quick and sell it, or, there's a lot of gambling apps now. Like, how can I make money fast? How can I grow fast? If you can kind of think a lot longer term, I think your chance of success just, yes, it might take longer, but, the journey is part of it. And I think I appreciate that more now that it took me 30 years than if it had happened quickly. Who knows? I might have thought, oh, this is easy. I can do this again. Um, my favorite quote, I always like to say, is, the best way to create the best way to predict the future is to create it. And I kind of say, I think people can have a much bigger part in creating their future than they think. And that's something, luckily, I think I was just wired with that from an early age that, you can kind of create the future if you think long term and you just take, yeah, sometimes the smallest of steps, whether it's your business, your health, your family, or like whatever small steps kind of lead you towards that outcome that you want. There's almost no outcome that you can't achieve. So I don't know. I just kind of believe it, and that's something I try to share with my kids a lot too. And, and uh, um,
Yes, and thank you for that. Thank you for being here today, for sharing your experience with all of the listeners. And I'm sure that they got a lot of value and a lot of advice from you, helpful.
yeah, yeah, my pleasure. Thank you, Navina, for having me on. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for being here, for listening. Please leave us some comments. What would you like to hear in the next episodes? Which topics you want us to cover? Give us some likes, hearts, and as always, remember to share with at least one entrepreneur that can benefit from this episode and this value that Eric brought to the show. And make sure to connect with him on social media as well. Follow and reach out if you are looking for support at any time. Thank you for being here, and I see you in the next episode.